Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you to those of you who are in this room and also to those of you joining us via live stream. First of all, I wonder how the little guessing game went. I hope you got most of it right, although I am sure you were pretty surprised. To begin, I would like to play another little game with you. For those of you present in this room, I am going to ask you to please check under your seat for a Post-it. It should be on the right side. Okay, now, for those of you who did not find a Post-it, I am going to ask you to please stand up. Well, you represent the share of men who have been in charge of 54 of the most important multilateral organizations since 1945. You may now take your seats. And now, for those of you who did find a Post-it, please stand up.
Whoa, yes.
Well, I am afraid to tell you that you represent the share of women who have led these organizations over the past 8 decades. You can take your seats. And this is why we are here today, to shed a light on the traditions of exclusion that have kept women from leadership positions for far too long within the international system. And what a better way to start than with someone who has paved the way for countless women around the world and whose example has inspired all of us. Our speaker needs no introduction. Please help me welcome Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Oh my gosh, it is so wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you not only for that introduction, Alba, but for that visual representation of what we are talking about. And speaking of representation, it is really a great pleasure to see so many women who have represented their countries, their causes, their concerns over so many recent years. I'm really grateful for the work that is being done, and especially for the Flagship GWL report on women's representation in the highest levels of global organizations, because if we don't count it, we can't know what it is we need to do. And this report gives us a real guidepost as to how to direct our attention and resources. You know, accountability work like this is so important because I think we've learned over the years and over a lot of challenges, it is not enough to just say words like equality or parity. They have to be backed up with actions in order to achieve real change. Now, I recognize that the report's findings may seem discouraging to some, and of course it is disappointing to see how few multilateral organizations have fulfilled a stated commitment to gender parity in their own leadership teams. But I think it also shows progress and hard-won gains. representation of women in top roles has greatly increased over the last 20 years. So in that way, this report is a record of the work done at conferences like this one by women, like all of us, who have stood up and made the case over and over again. And sometimes that's what it takes, to make the case over and over again, because you're never quite sure when someone might finally start listening. But the report is also a roadmap about how far we still have to go. So you've already heard, because of the interesting visual exercise we just engaged in, since its founding in 1946, the UN General Assembly has had 74 male presidents and 4 female presidents. Women are underrepresented in each of the 24 governing bodies analyzed, and 39% of the world's most important multilateral organizations have never elected or selected a woman as their leader. So today we'll talk about these inequities and these inequalities across the international system, but it's so important to recognize that the first step in solving a problem is to name it and to see its dimensions clearly. I think we have all believed that advancing the rights and full participation of women and girls is the great unfinished business of the 21st century. This is true from primary school education and small businesses, from city halls and capitol buildings, all the way to the highest positions of global power. But it's not just enough that women participate, and it's not just an issue of morality and justice. It is a political, economic, and social imperative. We cannot make the progress we want to make and deserve to make without women at the table, and that means every table. So I do look forward to the time when gender parity is the status quo, when reports like this don't have to be written, and where any room we walk into anywhere will have as many women as men into it. And I look forward to the new conversations we'll be able to have when we've made sure that women's voices are always a part of those discussions. So I want to thank Susana and the leadership team of GWL and everyone who worked on this report. And I think in addition to having a conversation about it, we need to really zero in on how to make it happen. So there is also a Secretary General race that is going to be coming up. And we've never had a woman SG either. Well, we've never had a woman president either. I mean, a lot of things we haven't had in the United States and elsewhere, but we need to focus on what we can achieve and looking at all these multilateral organizations and how they select leaders. We need a fuller pipeline. We need more vigorous discussion about what we're looking for in leadership. In fact, we need to be really redefining what leadership means in the world today. So with that, let's have a conversation about how we get there. Thank you all very much.
Secretary Clinton, for your support and for your wisdom. Now, I have the pleasure of welcoming María Fernanda Espinosa, the Executive Director of GWL Voices, to guide us through the key findings of our Women in Multilateralism 2024 report. Please give her a warm welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Clinton. What an incredible way to start to present our report. And let me start by the obvious. You said it so well. No one is surprised that women are rare at the top of international organizations. We saw it vividly here when we were doing this little game at the beginning. And that's why last year, GWL Voices decided to gather data. We are an evidence-based organization, to look closely, to see, to follow the appointments, to look at history, because we strongly believed that to look at the present of organizations, you have to look at the past. Because the way they work today sometimes is based on tradition, on institutional cultures. So here's what we learned. Since 1945, women have made up only 13% of all elected leaders in 54 of the world's more important multilateral organizations. And these include, of course, UN specialized agencies, funds, programs, as well as development banks. And now let's dig deeper. Let's go deeper. Here, don't worry if you cannot read the names of the organizations. You can see that in the report. But I think this slide shows the gender of the leaders of each organization since 1945. The oldest organizations are at the top and the youngest at the bottom. The dark orange segments represent women, and the pale ones represent men. And I am very proud to say that some of the darker orange dots are women that are here in this room. And most of them are members of our GWL Voices. So here we are speaking out of personal experience. That's what we have lived collectively together. When I see around the room, I see so many of you present here. And that's why we are, of course, so proud. Please note as well that 21 of these organizations, as Hillary mentioned, have never elected a woman at the top job, not once. 21 of these organizations. 15 organizations have elected a woman just one time since 1945. That's what we call, and I love this expression that I recently learned, one and done. We don't want also a one and done thing. So, and finally, just 18 of these organizations have elected a woman more than in one occasion. Only 18 of these organizations. And the truth is that progress has been extremely, extremely slow. Look at this graph. This graph shows that there was even a whole decade. We are trying to understand why, but the 70s, where these institutions did not have a single woman leader. And perhaps we can start asking ourselves why in the 70s. That's a question open to you afterwards. But then it's also exciting to see that after decades of inertia, we move towards gender parity, and we are gaining momentum. From the 2000 to 2010, the percentage of elected women leaders in these organizations nearly doubled. We went from 17% to 31%, which is not bad. And just in the last 2 years, a total of 8 women have been named to the top job at these organizations. 5 of these 8 organizations made history by electing a woman to the top job for the first time ever. And let me show you a beautiful slide. I just love these slides. Let's enjoy it for a moment. And if you allow me, I would like to read out loud their names because it means a lot. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary General of the International Telecommunications Union. And guess what? The first woman in 157 years. 157 years. Amy Pope, Director General of the International Organization on Migration. Gisela Sanchez, President of the Central American Bank for Economic Integration. Celeste Saulo ended 73 years of male-only leadership at the World Meteorological Organization. 73 years. And let's not forget, of course, an incredible Spanish woman, Nadia Calviño. She's now the first female head of the European Investment Bank in 66 years of history. So let me just watch for one more second before we go to the next. Okay, I hope you enjoyed as much as I did looking at this picture. And some of these are not even reflected in our report because it just happened. So, but we wanted to show this incredible picture. So, we have to also point out something. Some organizations have not, in spite of the elections last year, have not managed to extend their decades-long tradition of only elected men at the top job. And I have to mention them. So we did not succeed with the World Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank, with the Food and Agriculture Organization, with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the International Labor Organization. These organizations remained the way they have been for the last almost 8 decades. But we have good news. And the good news is that in the next 3 years, 22 of these organizations will be electing new leaders. So I think that we will have many more opportunities to make history. And be reassured, we will be monitoring, we will be watching. Now, as you know, this is not the whole picture. UN funds, programs, international organizations. After we published the report last year, many of you asked us, how about the governing bodies? How about the senior management teams? And we looked at it. We basically looked at the data, and sometimes, and this is important, why? Because in multilateral organizations, governing bodies have more authority than the chief executive sometimes. That is where governments use their voting power to set the agendas, to set the priorities. And in a day-to-day operations, senior management teams have enormous influence. And Sima knows that very well. So this year, we set out to investigate women's representation in these spaces too. And here's what we found. I'll start with the good news. These are the good news. These are indeed the good news. What is that we see? We are thrilled to report that nearly half of these organizations are close to reaching gender parity, or have already achieved it. I'm referring here to the senior management teams, of course. And the average share of women in senior management is 42%, which is not bad at all. And only 5 of these organizations are stuck below the 25%. But this amazing change is no accident, and I think Hillary said that. It is the pressure of civil society. It is the political will of leaders. And in this case, I think that we have to acknowledge a gender champion, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He promised he will do that, and he has delivered. I think that the evidence is clear. With the right policies, real commitment at the top, gender parity can be achieved, and it can be achieved quickly. But unfortunately, and here are the not so good news, We cannot say the same for the governing bodies. Remember that the representatives to governing bodies are appointed directly by governments. So here comes the government responsibility side of it. As you can see, women are underrepresented in governing bodies of every single one of these organizations. The average share of women is just 30%, unfortunately, and in 7 organizations, women make up to less than 25% of the total. Although there has been progress, and we can see some progress, we continue to see women excluded from spaces that set the global policies on issues ranging from climate to food security to armed conflict. So this, I think that there is a lot of space for improvement. So this is a call to governments directly. But before we go any further, I would like to open the floor and listen to your reactions here in the room, but also from the ones following us online. So the floor is open. We wanted to share this news that are, you know, bittersweet news, I would say. Lots of space for improvement, and the floor is open for your reactions and questions. Here's a question from online. Okay, superb, superb. This has been live streamed, as we mentioned. Okay, María Fernanda, I am from Peru, and I wonder if you are gathering data on how many women my government is appointing to these organizations. I want to see how we compare with other countries. This is a brilliant question, and thank you to the person from Peru, because we think that it is critical. Next report is going to include a tracking of countries, individual countries, appointing representatives to the governing bodies, to the ambassadors to the UN and other multilateral organizations. So thank you to Peru, and if we do that, I'm sure that you can check on how your country, your individual country is doing. Thank you for this question. I cannot see if there are hands up around the audience. I see a couple, so if you help me with a microphone, but before we continue with the microphone, I would like to ask from personal experience around this room. We have here, let me just, sorry that I'm picking on you here, Helen Clark. You were the administrator of UNDP. You know, how did you experience the relationship with your own board? How were people, you know, representatives appointed? What was the gender ratio when you were leading UNDP? If we have a microphone down here. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Well, first, I think I can say that UNDP was ready for a woman leader. They welcomed it, which was nice. But there weren't so many women in the senior roles around New York, UNICEF being an honourable exception. The governing bodies were comprised of the diplomats from the countries who had been elected for that purpose through ECOSOC. And of course, the diplomatic corps in New York is very heavily male, right? And I think the question of Peru points to that. We need to know what proportion of the women diplomats coming country by country what proportion are women. So yes, your governing board was largely male, and I think the bureau, which was usually about 5 of them, I'm not sure I remember women on the bureau at all, maybe once or twice, so yeah. Not so much. I think you know, there were issues being a woman in that job and in New York. I remember one Under-Secretary General who took great exception with something UNDP was doing once, rang me up and he said, "Look here, little lady." And I said, "Don't you little lady me." So we established fairly early on that this was not the way to go. But yeah, you did have to really put your stake in the ground and say, I'm doing this job and I can do it as well as anyone else. Thanks.
Super. Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much. Let me now turn to a couple of you in the room. I saw many hands up, so help me at the back. When our her turn champions, I cannot see, but just use your voices and I will, listen attentively.
Hello. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all members present on my behalf and on behalf of all my mates from the Her Turn initiative. I wanted to ask, with the rising trends towards democratic backsliding and the implications that has in terms of discrimination against women, would you expect that in future years the representation of female counterparts in the UN and many organizations, it's going to decrease, or you cannot make any assumptions yet?
Well, I think that's difficult to foresee because, the political dynamics, these are political choices. When you appoint a woman that is capable, that has all the qualifications, at the end of the day, it ends up being a political choice, of course. And the trend is, yes, unfortunately, that progress toward gender equality is not predictable and is not progressive. So we have to be awake all the time, monitor all the time, do the oversight, and civil society, younger generations, everybody has a responsibility to watch and monitor. Because, as I said, progress is not incremental, and we cannot just sit and relax. And as women, we know we can never sit and relax. So thank you for the great question. Let me take a final question before we go to an incredible part of this report, the concrete part of the report. Please, you at the back. I don't know who has the microphone. And
okay, well, thanks everyone for being here, and especially for you for organizing these GWL Voices. I would like to ask, well, first of all, multilateralism should guarantee that everyone has a seat at the table. However, women's experiences vary due to those diverse identities that can add additional challenges for them to achieve global leadership roles, such as those faced by young women, but also women from developing countries or lower income households, refugees, LGBT+ members, indigenous women, and those with disabilities, among many others. So my question is, what are your thoughts on these intersectional realities, and does GWL Voices aim to include them in order to ensure that their voices are heard as well in these decision-making processes? Thank you.
Well, definitely. We are, the program Her Turn, we are about intergenerational, horizontal spaces of mutual learning. We are about including people from all parts of the world, all sectors, all schools of thoughts and backgrounds. And I think that our own membership reflects that diversity, of course. Let's now turn to the solutions. We can turn the tide on this. We can be practical. We can be concrete. And for the concrete part of this, I have the privilege to invite our GWL Voices president, Susana Malcorra. Susana, please come on stage. And thank you.
Thanks, Maria Fernanda. I'm going to declare myself guilty here with these lights on, honestly. And I am guilty, I guess. First, I want to thank Hillary for joining us and for raising her voice with ours. Your voice is well recognized throughout the world, and it means a lot that you see things in the same direction that we see things, so thanks for that, Hillary. You know, we are known, and Fernanda said this, as a fact-based organization. We are an advocate organization. We advocate for issues, but we want to advocate based in data. We think that the best way to push back on the pushback. And that's why we have produced the report last year. We launched it in New York during CSW, and we are relaunching a second report now here in our dialogue in Madrid. We not only look for data, we read data to push for reform. We use data to push for change. And again, we think that's the best way to secure change. And now we are looking into the General Assembly. You know, we always say that august body, and it's impressive. You know, I don't know if all of you have ever entered the hall of the General Assembly, but it's a place where you feel the presence of the peoples of the world. So it's a very important place. And since we are talking about the General Assembly, let me start showing you what I will argue is a very shameful picture. Let's go for that. This is the share of female representatives at the General Assembly today. 27%. Out of 193 countries, only 27% have a woman sitting there on behalf of her country. It is a really, really bad number. In fact, there was a question from Peru. We don't have the data from Peru specifically, but there are many countries that have never appointed a woman to represent the country at the General Assembly. And I will leave an exercise. Google that after the meeting. Don't get into that now, but after the meeting, Google and try and find out whether your own country has ever had a woman represented at this General Assembly. As you might know, I'm sure, the Secretary General is elected every 5 years, and with that election comes a big, big hope, and we'll talk about that in a short while. But the presidency of the General Assembly changes every year. So every single year, a new president comes at the helm of this very democratic representation of the peoples of the world. The president plays a very important role. President plays the role of setting the agenda, or of defining priorities, of steering the conversation among member states on some of the most substantive issues that will define how the world sits before the challenges that we all face. Not only that, the General Assembly also approves the budget of many of these institutions, so it doesn't only have policy influence, it also has financial influence. So let me show you another reality. In 78 years since the first General Assembly gathered, 74 of those years, a man led the General Assembly. Let's look at that picture. Isn't it amazing? Those 4 women stand out. Not only that we paint them more clear so that they will stand out, it's only 4 of them. And by the way, we have one of those 4 sitting here. María Fernanda is the last president of the General Assembly. Since we did not put the pictures of the presidents year by year, the male presidents, we did put the pictures of the female presidents. These pictures have been generated by artificial intelligence. And they show what artificial intelligence says is the look of the typical president of the General Assembly. So get your own conclusions there. One interesting thing is that the General Assembly, and rightly so, I will argue, is hypersensitive about fairness and equitable representation. this is something that always is there in every single conversation. Of course, when we talk about equitable and fairness, we talk about geopolitics. There is never a reference to equitable and fair representation regarding gender, regarding women. And that's what we want to talk about. The General Assembly decided, and wisely so, I will again argue, some time ago, that the presidency will rotate among regions. There are 5 regions defined as part of the world representation. Every year, the president comes from a different region. And I think this was a smart move. It secured the fact that no single region will overtake power at the presidency, that all big and small countries could come forward. So this is at the heart of the spirit in the General Assembly and in choosing the presidency of the General Assembly. This year, for example, has been the turn of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have, yet again, a male president coming from my part of the world. The president of the General Assembly is Dennis Francis, a very seasoned diplomat. He is a full supporter of our views, and he's a champion on our issues. So we really count on him for what we are going to propose and move forward now. Still, we believe that the commitment to fairness and equitable representation is short of a real 360-degree perspective if we don't have and add the gender dimension. This is exactly what we want and what we propose. To that extent, GWL Voices proposes a very simple rule change. Very, very simple. It's what we call the gender alternation rule, which means 1 year a man, the next year a woman. What could be simpler than that? No need to explain much. Just to add to the rules that exist today that refer to the rotation among different regions, one additional caveat, which should be a man 1 year, a woman the next one. Isn't that something obvious, something natural? But I know that some of you might wonder whether this will work. Let me look at this picture and compare this picture to the one we had before. Of course, this is a forward-looking picture. This is how it will look from now on. And it looks so obvious that sometimes I wonder why am I standing here trying to explain something that is so natural. Well, it's evident that it doesn't come so naturally. So we need to really work on this. But let's think whether adding this dimension puts any restraint or constraint to the sovereign decision and the power of each government. It does not. This will only say in the next years, and we know this moving every single year, it will move from Latin America to Africa, of course, then it will move from Africa, I think it's to Europe, and we can say, if it's the next turn, and a man is here today, the region needs to go for a woman. And it will be hard to say that any region lacks the possibility of having wise women at the helm of the General Assembly. In fact, we are suggesting this minor change introduced as an addition to the existing resolution. And what we propose is something quite symbolic and quite important. This year we are in the 78th General Assembly. We are 2 years away from the 80th anniversary of the creation of the United Nations. So what we would like to get is for the 78th General Assembly to adopt this resolution and to say, for the first time in UNGA 80, when we celebrate the 80th anniversary, we start kicking off this gender alternation. So there will be a woman leading the 80th General Assembly. That is very symbolic, but it's not only symbolic. You know, symbols matter. It also shows a United Nations committed to deliver on what they preach. And I think it's absolutely central that we do that. Somehow, it will eliminate that blind spot of gender exclusion, which is there, and it will show that the UN practices what it preaches, as I said, and it will encourage countries to use this as a model to their own decisions. Let me tell you, it's not that we were that creative with this idea, not that we were unique with this idea. There are different examples that show that gender alternation is now being introduced. And let me use my part of the world, Latin America and the Caribbean. There are quite a few countries, Ecuador, Peru, and Costa Rica, that have other gender alternation in their political policies to decide on elections. And they are pushing for this, and it's making a difference. But let me give you an example that is very recent, and again, showcases when the political will is there, things happen. And this is from the state of Yucatan in Mexico. The state of Yucatan just changed its constitution this past year, very recently. And they introduced in the state constitution the gender alternation clause for governor. So now it is enshrined in the constitution of the state of Yucatan that if the governor is a man now, the next cycle will be a woman. It is powerful. It shows commitment. And that's exactly what we want to happen with the General Assembly and the presidency of the General Assembly. It will send a very clear message also for the run-up of the Secretary General in 2026. Hillary spoke about that. We have a new selection process coming in 2026. Secretary General Antonio Guterres will step down at the end of 2026. The new Madam Secretary General will come on board on January 1st, 2027. And it will be very symbolic to have a woman leading the General Assembly when this takes place. So not only we talk about women taking the power in the most important institution that represents the world and the peoples of the world, we also show the commitment that member states make to this principle. So you will be hearing from us and our Madam Secretary General campaign very soon. But again, we want to start now this year with something landed, something that is very actionable, and that is the adoption of this resolution on a man a year, a woman the next one, at the helm of the General Assembly. We were very pleased when the high-level debate took place in September last year that there were some member states that endorsed publicly their support. And I want to start with the president of Slovenia, Nataša Musar. She included a reference to this in her speech, and we are absolutely thankful for that. We were also honored this morning to have President Sanchez opening our dialogue. He also spoke about gender alternation at the General Assembly. So again, his commitment, the government of Spain commitment, fully behind. In September also, President Mosisi of Botswana supported our request. So we are thrilled to see that this is taking energy, is taking form, is shaping. We would like to hear from you now. What do you think about our proposal? Is it crazy? Is it something that we are totally out of place? Or is it something that is so natural that the question is, why not? I'm preaching to the converters here, I guess. Many countries are represented here. So I would like to see whether you feel that your country, I know that most of you don't have the power to speak on behalf of your country, but will you do something to push your country? Is something that you believe your country should do? I would like to hear from you and gather that energy that we need. And in order to do that, let me start by putting some people on the spot. And it's easy to do this because I have already mentioned that some of them publicly have endorsed this idea. And let me start by Eva Music. Eva is here representing the President of Slovenia. And Eva, I would like to hear from you, so I am not a translator here. How does your government and your president see this notion of gender alternation? A mic, please, here.
It's on, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like...
Please, come here, Eva,
Thank
because it's a bit dark, so...
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Susana, first, for thinking of this very logical proposal. And then I would also like to thank a previous president of Slovenia, Dr. Danilo Tirk, who came and he was a messenger of this beautiful proposal to the new president, who for the first time in Slovenia happens to be a woman, Nataša Pirc Musar. She broke the glass ceiling, and who, when it was proposed to her, she said, of course, let's do it. So she included it in her statement. She regrets to not be able to be here today. She's fully committed. We are willing to do our best to help the initiative. We have a lot of work to do from now until September to convince other governments, and we would very much like to support the idea of group of friends where we can work together and lobby other countries. But I also want to add, when Hillary Clinton famously said women's rights are human rights, I was a young diplomat at the time, and those words were immensely empowering for the women of my generation. And I very much hope that the young women in the audience today take these words for granted. I very much hope so. And I thank you again for this proposal, and Slovenia will support it as much as we can. You can count on us.
Thank you. Thank you. So we had Slovenia, the president, now her representative. We had President Sanchez saying something today, but maybe I can call on Cecilia Robles, to confirm that Spain is committed. What can you say after the president has said it? She has to give the space.
Thank you very much, Susana and María Fernanda, for the presentation of the report. And thank you, Secretary Clinton, for your inspiring words. And yeah, there is not much to say after the words of the President of the government this morning. But yeah, I would like maybe to insist on the fact that on the bodies and on the organs of the United Nations where we still have to work, the General Assembly has a very special significance due to the fact that it's, it's a main body of the United Nations, it's the main deliberative organ of the organization, and its representativeness and inclusiveness will be enhanced if the presidency is alternated, as you have suggested. So yes, full support of Spain to work on this objective, maybe through the creation of a group of friends, and we are looking forward to see how we can best make this agenda progress at the UN. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cecilia. Let me tell you, we have a hand up there, so please, there is a hand up there.
Hello, my name is Elise Buckle. I'm co-founder of She Changes Climate and co-chair of the Gender and Climate Impact Group based in Geneva. I love this idea, and actually it's been proposed by one of the members of the Impact Group for the COP presidencies. Indeed, since COP1, when Angela Merkel was president of COP, there has been only 5 women as COP president in 29 years. So I just wonder if we could do the same campaign for the UNFCCC negotiations, and we can win both. I think Azerbaijan will be tricky, but we could get Brazil on board for next year.
All for it, all for it. We are not going to request for rights. Just replicate, do it. Let me ask for somebody who is sitting here representing the government of Mexico. And I think it's very important, Laura Carrillo is here, and Laura is the Undersecretary for Latin America and the Caribbean, and she happens to be in Madrid, and she, of course, we have a good friend of ours as the Secretary of State, you know, Alicia Bárcena is a close friend, and she has been delegated with the authority to talk about the commitment of the government of Mexico. Laura.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you, Susana. Thank you for having us from Mexico. I just want to take a moment, if I may, to talk about the commitment that the government, President López Obrador, has for ensuring parity in our government. We have parity in the cabinet. As you well know, my boss, Secretary Alicia. We also have like the security of the whole country in the hands of a woman. And we also have 9 governors. That's 30% of governors right now. But the next elections, the way that we see the number of women candidates will most likely have 2/3 of governors, women governors. We have also in the legislature, we have half and half, women and men. And we are very, very, very likely to elect our first women president next June. We are very excited. We have 2 women candidates and one. So it's very, very possible that we will have our first Madam President for the next term. And well, right now, I'm very, very honored and very, very proud to speak on behalf of my country and tell you, everyone, that we are fully committed and we totally support this initiative of gender parity in the General Assembly of the United Nations. We will do everything in our power to ensure it.
Thanks, Laura. I know we have here representatives from Uruguay. Please, could you raise your hands? Am I seeing them? I don't see them, but anyway, I can speak on behalf of Uruguay. Not because I am from Argentina, neighbor of Uruguay, and can take that responsibility, not at all. Uruguay has sent a note verbal, being very formal, communicating to GWL Voices that they are absolutely thrilled with this notion of a man and a woman following each other at the presidency, and that they will support it as part of a campaign within the membership. So, thanks, Uruguay. So, we are getting here some positive vibes, some commitments. Does anybody want to say something like, you know, the reference to COP? That's another good example of where we can make a difference. Does anyone else here?
Thank you, Susana. And let me say, I just wanted to take a moment to bring into the conversation. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, everybody knows who is speaking, but just in case you don't, this is Patricia Espinosa. She was Foreign Minister of Mexico, but she's also the champion of climate change. So, Patricia.
Thank you, Susana. And it's just wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you, Hillary, for being here. I just wanted to express, to bring into the conversation one aspect that has been worrying me very much. And then this is the polarization that we are seeing around the world on women's issues, also other issues, but women's issues, it's very clear. So of course, I wholeheartedly support this campaign and this effort, and I really thank you for bringing it up and also for making all this research. But I do think that now we would need to concentrate on, okay, how are we going to do it? What is it that we are going to be facing? What are the challenges that we will be facing? Who is going to be able to speak to the many countries that we see in the negotiations when we're sitting down and we are trying to get some decisions made and are opposing any reference to women's rights, for example, or are opposing even still now, of course, the fact of recognition of inheritance rights for women. I can tell you that these are some of the concepts that in the resolutions at COP have not been able to get introduced, right? And if we want to do this, we need to be conscious that we will need to get everybody on board. So I guess we will have to be working also with the women in those countries that are normally not on board, right? So please count on me.
Thank you. Patricia brings a very important question. Having a woman at the helm is a precondition, but it's not enough. We know that. And by the way, having a woman, we are talking about having a feminist woman, because there are also other types. And I always remember our good friend Madeleine Albright that used to say that the way to hell was paved with women who did not help other women. So we need that, and we need to build a constituency in so many places where this notion of women's rights or human rights is backsliding, and unfortunately we see that in many parts of the world. North, south, east, west, and let's not go into specific examples. Any other comments from the audience?
I think we have something from the live stream.
Oh, sure, sorry. From the US, how soon do you think that the alternation proposal could go to a vote? What needs to happen? Well, that's the work we are now launching. We think that this should happen this year before the new General Assembly starts in September. And as I said, we hope to do it so that it goes into a reality in the next General Assembly. We have to start working on this. We have seen already quite a few countries pushing and not only pushing, really supporting the idea, this notion of creating a group of friends. This is maybe for the ones who are not acquainted with the practices in New York, this is quite a common thing to do when you want to support a certain initiative. You gather the support from a group of friends. It's a very informal setting. It doesn't have any formal recognition, but it adds voice and volume to the support of that issue. We are now hearing from member states that they are ready to create a group of friends. So this should happen as soon as possible. And I think we will have to go through the exercise, and we cannot underestimate that there might be some who do not agree. But since equitable representation is at the center of the General Assembly, since the Charter of the UN says we the peoples, and men and women should be equally represented, it's hard to believe that this is not going to be adopted this year. So, without further delay, I think we are getting to the end of this presentation. We are energized by the notion of the support of governments already committed to do it. We are energized by your presence here. Of course, as I said, here we are preaching to the converters, but the converters that are here need to go back to their countries, push on their governments, raise the question, speak up, write an editorial, and really create the momentum so that this very basic change, that not only we will have geographic alternation at the helm of the UN presidency of the General Assembly, but also gender, a man, a woman, a man, a woman, will be a reality, and will be a reality starting in the General Assembly number 80 to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the birth of the UN. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the ones who were watching us stream, and we will continue with the program. Thank you.
Back at 4:30, we would like to remind you that the dialogue will be after 4:30 under the Chatham House rules. As you know, this means anything that is said in this room should not be attributed to anybody on social media. Thank you very much.